Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. It's a Stashin with Stephanie Day, and that means we've got a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that's been inspired by this month's fabric collection. I'm really excited both to buy the fabric and the pattern this month. We're working with Impressions by Melissa Marie Collins from Windham Fabrics. It is stunning. It is one of those really special collections that needs a really special pattern. And we had this wonderful independent bookstore in my town that I love taking my girls to get children's books from. And I ended up with a shapes book for my 2-year-old that was written with the shapes of Frank Lloyd Wright. And there were all of these interlocking triangles when you got to the triangle section. And I was like, this needs to be a quilt. And when I saw this fabric, I was like, this is the fabric to do it with. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to have some careful planning of what fabrics you're going to put where, but don't worry, we'll talk you through all of that. But it is a fantastic way to use this collection, really let it shine, and it doesn't use a whole lot of background fabric. So it is kind of a smaller quilt, but it is one that when you have that special fabric where you just want the fabric to be the star of the show, this is one of those quilts. So we're going to make that work. And before we get into the actual tutorial, we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the club, and then we're going to take a sneak peek at the fabric that we're going to use. So if you are already a member and you already know what you've got in your bundle, you can skip ahead at this part. But if you're not a member, let me tell you about it. We have about 800 members at this point. What we do is we send out 10 fat quarters every month to our members, and usually there's 15 pieces in that collection. So they get it, they can just have it, they can add it to their collection, they can do something with it at any point in time. But if they so choose, they can get what's called a finishing kit, which includes the 5 fat quarters they didn't get, plus whatever they need for background and binding. In this case, they're going to get 6 fat quarters because everybody didn't get one that we are using within the fabric, and we're going to have scrappy binding and background. So it's really a fun thing because you can just have your little bit that you can add to your fabric collection and do whatever you want with, or if you really like that month's project, you can get exactly what you need to complete your collection and be able to make that project. And you get it at a discount. And inflation is everywhere, including in the fabric industry. So to be able to save 20% on your fabric purchases for Stashin with Stephanie, that's a big deal, especially because some of these fabrics do sell out. I think this is going to be one that does because it is fantastic and just really fun. And so that is fun. They also get first dibs. They get a full day's head start on getting additional fabric before we release it to the rest of our email list and our YouTube subscribers. And if that is not enough, you also get access to all of our previous Stashin with Stephanie patterns. It is over a $200 value at this point. And then also you get a special discount, 30% off my Fat Quarter books, Fat Quarter Workshop, and Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts. So those are really fun. It's a great way to use up that stash if you're trying to save some money. And then also you can get additional fabrics for less when you do have a project that you really love. So check it out, really fun. All right, we're gonna take a peek at this fabric. It is absolutely fantastic. And then we're gonna get into the tutorial on how to make this really fun quilt. So there are 3 main prints over 5 different colorways, and they're absolutely gorgeous. This sort of confetti looking one, pixelated, is just fantastic. It has a bunch of, it reads purple, but it also has some magenta in it and blue, which we're gonna see in other areas of the collection. This swirl is also absolutely gorgeous. I love especially this purple one because we have little bits of color that we're going to see in other sections. There's magenta, there's some blue, there's some green, and the movement of it is just really fun, and we're going to use it on a big scale, so it's going to just retain the loveliness that is this fabric. This one reminds me of graffiti, and it is my favorite in every single of the colorways that it's used in. This one has a little bit of everything, but it definitely reads more purple, and it just is so fun and fantastic. Now we're switching into more of the blue colorway. This one is a big mixture of blue-green. It's gorgeous. We're back to that confetti print that we saw at the beginning. Now we are on to that swirl again. This time we have mixtures of the orange, reddish, and gold in there. It is gorgeous. It looks like a water sunset. It is just so fun. Now we have that same graffiti-like print, but this time in the colorway we just had, plus some purple thrown in. I just love it. It's so much fun. Now we're going to wrap this up with a really deep blue swirl. Now we've moved on to the green colorway. This is that confetti print again with a little bit of pink and a little bit of yellow thrown in. It's really fun. The yellow is more pronounced in the swirl version of the green, and we also have hints of blue and purple in there. We're transitioning again into another colorway. We're going to have a lot of rust and golden colors here. This one is a very yellow golden confetti. Here's that swirl print again. Again, it reads very golden rust, but we have little bits of pink and blue in there as well. All right, we have a very hot version of the swirl. This one is just flaming red, orange, yellow with a little bit of fuchsia in there too. This is the last of those hot colors with that confetti and little hints of blue. Here's that graffiti print in a grayscale, and it is absolutely gorgeous. We've got the confetti in a grayscale. And if you're a member of the club, this is the one that nobody got in their bundles. It is available in the finishing kit, however, and as yardage, and it is the grayscale swirl. Now, if you are grabbing a kit or a finishing kit, we have two background options for you. This is the swirl background option, which is the one that I'm going to be using in my quilt kit. And then we also have a confetti version. So they're both read very like grayish taupey, and they're really fun, and they really stand out very well against all of these fabrics. So it's really gonna make your triangles just pop. So check it out. Again, the fabric is called Impressions by Melissa Marie Collins. You can grab the fabric, you can grab a kit, you can get a finishing kit if you're a member, all over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Now, if you join Stashin with Stephanie because you saw this fabric and you absolutely love it and you need it, you are not gonna get this fabric. We've already shipped this out to our members. You are gonna want to order a full kit of this, and then your first bundle will come around the 20th of next month. And so that is gonna be some cotton and steel. We've got that coming up next. Clara Jane. It's gorgeous, it's fun, and we're super excited about it, but you're gonna wanna grab that then. So those are the things. People miss that every month. So we try to highlight it. If you love it and you join today, make sure you get a full kit of this. You can get it on your second purchase and get your discount. But this is not coming to you in the mail. We've already shipped that out. All right, so we're going to start the tutorial of this portion of the video with a complete tutorial on cutting triangles and diamonds. So people always get confused at this. They're cutting instructions and diagrams and the pattern that goes with this. And again, it's called Interlocking Triangles. You can get it on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. But I want to go over it really clearly because this is not your typical cutting where you're just cross-cutting triangles and squares. This is a little bit different because everything is using 60-degree triangles and diamonds. So you're going to want to first make sure that you get a ruler that's a 60-degree ruler that has all 3 points. Some of them have the top blunt, and the math is very different for that. Things are not going to fit together correctly if you use that ruler. So again, you want to make sure that you have the one with the tip. I'm using the Clearview triangle ruler. We have them on our website. They're fabulous. They're great. We use them in a ton of our patterns because I hate it when you like get a ruler and then it's never used again in another project. So if you like our patterns, if you're vibing with them, then we use this about every third month in one of our Stashin with Stephanie patterns. We have dozens of them that use this ruler, so you can use it a bunch of times. So I'm going to show you how to cut with it for all the different units that we need for this project. All right, so first we're going to start by cutting our large triangle. So what I'm doing is I am lining up the measurement that I need to cut to, and that's the width of this strip here, with the bottom of my piece. And I'm going to push it all the way over to where that selvage, that white part ends. And so I've got that lined up with the bottom, and I have the point lined up exactly with the top. Again, this needs to be pointy and not a flat edge. Now for this first cut, I'm going to go ahead and cut down the right side of the ruler, and I'm going to come back down the left side. Now for some patterns, you might need to use this. We do not for this one, so you can add it to your scrap pile, give it to a friend who enjoys it, or just toss it. All right, now when we pull this apart, you can see that our angle is now coming down. So we're going to give this a 180-degree flip so that the point is now on the bottom and the line that we are cutting with is even at the top. Now the edge of the ruler here should be absolutely even with the edge that we just cut, and you should have a perfect point at the bottom. If you are pushing this over some, then what's going to happen is you're going to give yourself a flat point at the top, and then again your math isn't going to work out. So it's very important that all your points are very pointy, and if they're not, you might have a problem later. Once I'm happy with where everything is, I'm going to go ahead and cut down this side. All right, and that is all we need for this pattern. This is extra. You can go to your scrap pile, or you can do something fun and do a piece back with it. The possibilities really are endless. So next I have a smaller set of triangles that I need to cut out. The process is the exact same, except we are going to cut everything we can from the strip and go all the way down. When you're done, you'll have a little bit extra. Again, that can go for your scrap pile or you can toss it. We've got one more unit that we're going to cut from our fat quarter strips. Then we have a little bit from our background and we're ready to sew. So right now we're going to cut a diamond. It's a little bit different, but it starts out the same. We're going to start the exact same way by cutting our triangle. But now instead of cutting across here, we're going to do something different. You're going to flip it over and you're going to line up the top line just like we did before, but the left edge of your ruler should be even with the tip of that angle that you just cut, and then the point should still be even with the bottom down below. Once you're happy with everything, go ahead and cut along the right side of that ruler. Now from here on, all we're going to do is just move our ruler down to cut the next diamond as we go. Again, we've got a little bit left over, keep your toss. All right, now we're going to cut our backgrounds. Now what you want to do is make sure, this is from a full width of fabric, not a fat quarter. Make sure that you still have it just the same way you did when you cut it and it was folded nicely. So you want to make sure you've got your wrong sides together and it's folded in half, so that way we can cut mirror image sections as we cut each part. I'm going to start by giving myself a nice straight edge over here. So one of the great things about this ruler is we have our center line here, but we also have lines on either side. That gives us our 1/4 inch seam when we need to make a half equilateral triangle, because if we just cut straight up to the point, then we have no seam allowance and it doesn't end up being the right size. But if we scooch that over and have our point be a 1/4 inch in, then it fits perfectly on the sides. We have our seam allowances, all is right with the world. So what you're going to do here is you're just going to line it up again with that 1/4 inch on the side, so your 1/4 inch to the left of your center. And then also you've got your inch line even with the bottom, just like we've been doing all along. Once you're happy with that, we're going to give it a cut. Now here's why you want to make sure that you have everything right sides together. Because when I take this apart, I have 2 mirror image pieces that are going to be great for being on the sides of my block. You can see real clearly when I pull the finished block out how much that comes in handy, because we're good to go. All right, I'm going to show you how to keep cutting down this strip so that you have plenty of these and no waste. So for my next cut, I'm going to take my 6 by 24 inch ruler and I'm going to line the top up, or actually the top up with my 3/4 in this case, because this is a larger piece. And I want that 1/4 inch mark to be nice and even with where that point is, because remember we need to have that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So as long as everything is nice and even up top, then I know that we're going to be nice and even and square, have a nice right angle here. And then with that 1/4 inch on the bottom, then I know I'm good to go there. So I can go ahead and give that a slice. Now I can lay those out so that I've got my mirror image for my different sides of my block. And now I'm just going to repeat those 2 steps going the rest of the way down this strip of fabric. right, so now you know how to cut both triangles, diamonds, and half equilateral triangles. So we are good to go for putting this quilt together. Now, the next thing we want to do is label what order we're going to use our fabric in. Now, while I love a quilt that's in color order, I wanted every single interlocking triangle to stand out. So when I was choosing my order, I made sure that each triangle fabric would contrast with the one that came after it. So as I was cutting, this is what's left from the fat quarter. So I took address labels and I just numbered each one of these. So that way I could have something to reference as I was working through. And as I was figuring out what order I wanted everything, I just laid out all my fat quarters until I had an order that I thought was pleasing to me, where each fabric both contrasted. So like I tried to make sure that the swirl wasn't next to another swirl. It didn't make that work in every instance. So like here we have two confettis next to each other, but that we would make sure to have contrast in each one of the fabrics. So that way as the blocks come together, we are going to create everything to have, you know, you can clearly see the work that we've done once we get everything put together. And so that was the order that I worked with. I really love how this is turning out, but you're going to make sure that you pay attention to this, and then you pay attention to the diagram that comes in the pattern so you know what to put where in your triangles. And just so you can visually see why fabric placement is going to be important in this pattern, I've laid out some blocks for you here. Here I have my fabric 16 with my fabric 1, which feeds into the next block, which has fabric 1 as my large triangle, and fabric 2 as my outside. And then we have 2 and 3 and 4, and it's going to continue on. So that's why it's important to pay attention to where everything is at and make it work. Now, we've got some fast forward video of how I did this. Essentially what I did is once I was done cutting everything, I made sure to stack everything up in order. So what I did first was I assembled my sides of my quilt, or of my blocks, and then I put my sides on the outside. That way I could just keep everything in absolute order. And then I was able to line things up, so that way 16 was on top, and then there was 1, 2, 3, and then I didn't have to think so hard. I just had to double check, and literally I had this next to me the entire time, so I could make sure that if I was working with piece 1 on the inside, then I had piece 2 on the outside. And then when I had 2 on the inside, I had 3 on the outside. And that worked really well for me to keep track. Here we can show it to you here. This would work a little bit better. So here we have piece 1, and that coordinates with this here. And then I knew I had piece 2 on the outside. So then when I moved on to the next one, here's piece 2. And I could double check and make sure that I had piece 3 on the outside. And that just continues. Here's 3. And here's 4. So that's a great way to double check. Again, we've got some fast forward video of me working on this so you can kind of see how I did it in real time. But for right now, I'm going to show you how to actually assemble the block, so that way you know how to do it at home. But like I said, this one is a little bit more tedious only because you have to plan where things go. But to get to this point of having all my blocks done has taken me 3 afternoons of sewing. So it's a very fast pattern because it's not a huge quilt. But it takes a little bit of thought, a little bit of planning ahead of time, but the results are so worth it. So we're going to start with the outsides of our interlocking triangle. Like I said, when I was doing this to actually assemble the quilt, I got everything in order. I stacked everything all together. That way I could chain piece, sewing this piece to this piece, press everything, and then sew the edge to it and press all of that. So I would just do this all at once. It made everything really great, really fast, but we're just going to do one at a time here today. So we're going to start here with how to line these up. Now, the benefit and why I like the Clearview ruler is we have all those points in there, which makes it a little easier to get everything lined up, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay these right sides together, and we're going to make sure that these points are right on top of each other down here. And when we do that and we have our edges aligned all the way up, you can see that a little valley is created here. Now, where this little valley is should be exactly 1/4 inch away from the edge here. So when you have your sewing machine needle set in the 1/4 inch position, you should be able to start here, stitch all the way across, and come out right where those two fabrics are meeting and creating a little divot. So that's what I'm going to do now. We're actually going to start on the side of the divot, stitch right down. Now, since I don't have to press the seam in order to get this one joined, I can actually flip this one right sides together. Again, we're going to start by getting those points together and sewing down the other side. I normally don't pin these, but I've probably sewn thousands together. So if it makes you feel more comfortable to pin, by all means go ahead and do that. Now before I take a minute to press, I'm going to go ahead and sew my other side as well. Now I almost always press my seams open, but I definitely do it absolutely every time I'm working with 60-degree diamonds or triangles. It makes for really great joins, and with these little dog ears that are pressed open, make it really easy to line things up as you're working with other units. So to do that, I just press those seams open and keep 2 or 3 fingers down on that seam ahead. That way I can just put the point of that iron straight down the center of that seam. You want it to be nice and straight, no wiggles. If there's a wiggle, then it means there's a pleat on the other side and you're going to have a problem. All right, once I'm done, I like to also press from the right side, just going over that seam one more time, getting it good and flat. All right, so to make my and your life easier when you guys are assembling this pattern, the next step is going to be to put our background half equilateral triangles onto our outside part of our triangle. The reason why we're doing it in this order is because at this point we still don't really have to worry about what order everything is going in, besides making sure that these are all made from the same fabric so that it appears as it's one triangle that's being intersected when everything is put together. So it won't be until the next step until we have to worry about what goes in this empty space here. So just like before, this is one of the reasons why I really like using that Clear Your Triangle ruler, because everything is about to line up really fantastically. All right, so you see we have a little point up here and a point down here, and of course we have a point here and a blunt end down here. Now when I flip this right sides together, I'm going to be able to line up these 2 points so that they fit perfectly. Now when I come down to the end here, the edge of this is going to fit absolutely perfectly with the point here. So basically the end of this point here should be right on top of my point below. Now this is going to stick out a little bit. When I eventually press the seam open, it's going to form a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance and everything is going to look great. Again, I don't pin these because I've done this a million times, but if you feel the need to, absolutely you can pin here and in the center if you so choose. But they should be the right length as long as you have an accurate 1/4 inch seam and you pressed your seams open, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting it to fit together. All right, so just like before, this needle from my 1/4 inch seam allowance should fit right where the valley of these two are when I put this in to line it up and sew. All right, so what I do, because I don't pin, is I go ahead and get it started, and then I grab my ends and I just kind of line them up and pinch them, and then I'll put a finger right here, make sure that everything is nice and lined up. I want to make sure that I'm careful not to pull because there's a lot of bias in here, which is not a bad thing. You can absolutely ease stuff in if it's a little off with that, but we also want to make sure that we're not stretching it as we're sewing. So when I keep my finger on, I'm just lightly holding it there. I'm not tugging in any way. All right, so once I get to here and I can't hang on to this anymore, what I do is I just move my hand to the side so I can continue guiding that 1/4 inch stitch all the way down to the end. Now I'm going to repeat on the other side. Oftentimes you'll find that it's easier to kind of go in opposite directions depending on what side it is that you are working on. So in this one I'm kind of starting at the bottom of the block. The last time I started at the top. Before I press this open, I want to take a close look at where that seam is so you can really see what I'm talking about. So you can see where this little valley is. That's exactly where my seam is. That's exactly where you want it to be in order to make sure that you end up with that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then when I come down here, that seam is going almost right out to that point. And if I were to flip this over, you can see that the point is meeting up just right where that corner is. And it ends up coming out right at the point of where that 1/4 inch is. This is going to be a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance for us. It's a little weird to get used to, but once you know where things are supposed to be, it makes total sense and you're going to be able to get it right every time. So just like before, we're going to go ahead and press this seam open. Again, it's going to give us some nice dog ears to line up with, and we're going to be able to seal our seam joins, which will also be helpful when we're putting our blocks together, but also it just helps it lay really flat, which is great for all those triangle and diamond points. Now at this point, I like to take a little extra care with my pressing. So when I press from the right side, I'm also going to take my spray mister and give the block a little bit of a spritz. This is kind of like having steam in your iron. I don't like to put steam in my iron because I feel like it gets everything gross eventually, and then it spits gross stuff all over your pretty fabric that you can't get off. But what it does is it just gives that nice little aerosol mist. Everything is super flat and gorgeous and the exact size it's supposed to be. So that combination of the really hot iron with the fleece or the wool pressing mat and the spray mister, it's golden. You'll have perfect piecing every time. So now it's time to consult your strips to figure out what's supposed to go where. For me, it's going to be this blue triangle in the center of my red outsides. So what I want to do next is basically the same thing we did before. We're going to line up a few things. Now this is why I like to keep these dog ears, because the point here is going to line up with the top point, and then the tip of this dog ear is going to line up with this one, which makes it super easy to get everything lined up. So when I flip these guys right sides together, I can easily get my top point to line up, and then my bottom point is going to line up right underneath where this dog ear is. It makes it really easy to just slide everything through your 1/4 inch seam and be good to go and know everything's going to be perfect. Now just like before, I don't pin these, but I've done a bunch of these. So if you feel more comfortable, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, get your top point started, match up your bottom points, make sure your edges are lined up in the center, and sew away. We've got to give this a press before we can sew on our other side. So there we have it. We have our block. It looks fantastic. It looks way fancier than it is, but you know that it wasn't so bad because you learned the tips and tricks to make it a little bit easier. Like I said, I've got all my blocks together for this quilt for sewing about 3 afternoons. That includes all my cutting and everything. So I'm going to show you now how to assemble your 2 blocks together, because there's a little bit of pinning where it would be good to have a little tip for, and then you know everything you need to know to match this quilt and make it together, and it is fantastic. I love it. So let's show you that last little tip, and then you're ready to rock and roll. All right, so at this point, when you're going to lay everything out, I recommend you use a design wall or a spare bed, because you want to make sure that everything is going together properly. So like, here's my fabric 1, it's going into fabric 1 here, and then here's my fabric 2. So I'm going to show you how to put 2 of these blocks together to create what looks like the interlocking triangle. Now this is where pressing those seams open is going to be very, very helpful, because we're going to be able to see exactly where our seam joins are, so that way we can pin right where the points are. So that way this just goes straight up into our triangle and looks absolutely fantastic. All right, so we can see when we look at it from this side that we can see where the point is. That's a 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance. Now they aren't always exactly a 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance, and that matters because when they're not quite right, you want your points to be on top of each other, even if they're not exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So I'm going to show you how to make those line up using 2 pins. Now I do this anytime I have triangle points to go together, but it's especially important when you're doing 60-degree triangles like this. So I can see here where all my seams are coming together. I have a seam coming here going up to the edge, and then I have one in the corner here. So I'm going to put my pin right in where all of those are coming together. Now I'm going to find the same spot here. It's a little closer to the edge than it was on my top one. So the edges of my seam are not going to align, but my points are going to be right on top of each other, which is what matters. Now, sometimes these dog ears aren't right on top of each other either. We're going to also ignore that, because what I've done here is I pinched right between my thumb and my forefinger so that that pin is going straight through at a 90-degree angle. Now, I'm not going to actually pin with this pin, because if I were to rock it forward, then my top fabric is going to move forward, my bottom fabric is moved toward me, and those points are not going to be on top of each other anymore. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take a second pin, and I'm just going to pin right across that section, making sure I'm hitting it right in the seam allowance and coming out right after. That'll ensure that those points stay on top of each other and look fabulous when we press it open later. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Find that where all those seams are coming together on the back, and then go through the same point over here. And whether or not they're the same distance from the edge, whether or not your dog ears line up on top of each other, doesn't matter. It matters that those points are on top of each other. All right, that is all we actually have to match for this block. So if you wanted to, you could pin your edges here, but you certainly don't have to. You can just kind of line those up as you go. You could pin your center if you want to, but again, not super necessary. As long as you have your 2 points here pinned, you're set to go. All right, so the other thing I want to do as I'm sewing this, I want to make sure as I'm sewing that I'm going to sew 1 needle width to the right of where all those seams come together. And if I do that, then I'm going to end up with those points being right next to the seam when I press that open, and it's going to look absolutely perfect. So whether this is a 1/4 inch away from the edge or not, you're going to stitch 1 needle width to the right of where all of those are coming together. It'll look perfect every single time. And if it's a little off on the inside, nobody's going to know that, but they will notice if your points are not on from the right side. All right, so I'm starting off sewing that 1/4 inch stitch, but as I get closer to where that point is, I'm kind of keeping an eye where things are, because remember I want to go 1 needle width to the right of where everything is, and I'm stitching right up to where this pin is. Like my needle, if I went 1 more, would be on top of that pin, and that makes sure that everything stays together until the last possible moment so nothing shifts on me. That's why I really don't like the 1/4 inch feet that have a little guide here, because that makes it hard to get that close. So I use those only when I'm doing things like top stitching. Now technically here we're going to want to make sure that we are 1/4 inch away, but if it isn't absolutely perfect, it'll be okay. Now if you haven't pinned like I have at this point, you want to make sure you are aligning everything so that your edges are even, both on your side and your bottom. And if you need to ease in a little bit, that is the beauty of the bias. You can ease in just a little bit as you make it through to have your edges line up nice. I'm going to press this seam open as well. We're going to get some great joins that way. And I'm just going super slow because you want to make sure you're lifting and pressing so we don't press any seams that we previously pressed open the wrong way. Make my way down. I'm also going to give this seam a spray with my spray mister so I can get it really nice and flat. Really get all those points absolutely fantastic. All right, this is just absolutely fabulous. These joins could not be any better. Even though I didn't pin this one was right on as well, with that 1/4 inch seam being right where it needs to. And you can see that those triangles just interlock and look absolutely fantastic. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see how good these points are. Here, this just is coming really nicely in. Same on this side. And then we're coming right to the point here. Now it is a super busy fabric, so if you're not right on it, probably isn't going to be the end of the world, but I really just love how this, like, it just looks continuous. Like we do in fact have a triangle that is intersecting, and it looks great. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this month's new pattern and tutorial, Interlocking Triangles. Again, you can get the pattern and kits on our website over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. I hope you're not too intimidated by having to plan your color placement ahead of time, but the results are really fantastic. And like I said, it really isn't hard. It was about 3 afternoons of piecing just to get my blocks together, and I think probably another 3 or 4 hours from here to get my top together, because it's not a huge quilt, so you're not asking too much of yourself. You just have to plan where you want things to go before you start, and use the handy charts and instructions in the pattern to make sure you follow along with that. So I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you decide to join Stashin with Stephanie because you love this fabric, I just want to remind you again that we have already shipped this bundle out to our members, and your first bundle is going to be Clara Jane from Cotton and Steel. You are not going to get this in the mail. So if you love it, you're going to want to sign up so that way you can get your first bundle next month. And then on your second purchase, go ahead and purchase a full kit of this, and it will have absolutely everything you need, all 16 fat quarters and background and binding to create this on your own. But if you, and you'll get the discount on it if you do it after you've signed up on that second purchase. But again, if you love this and you decide I want to join the club because this is so fantastic, make sure you get the kit separately, because we are not going to be sending you this in a bundle. Every month we have people who are confused, and so I just like to be super, super clear. So I'm sorry for those of you who are like, I get it, Stephanie, I get it. I'm just trying to keep the emails to our customer service team to a minimum by beating it over the head. Although if you do end up emailing about it, we are happy to help you and make sure you get what it is that you want and need. So check that out. All the things, Stashin with Stephanie, great program, helps you save on fabric, get access to over $200 worth of free patterns, and get a beautiful collection of fabric like this in your mailbox every month. We have like the last year and a half's worth of fabrics on there, so you can go ahead and view like what we've sent out previously, so you can see if it's your vibe, if it's something you might like. And that'll be super fun for you guys, and then you can save on additional fabric. So great way to be able to keep quilting as prices rise on absolutely everything, including quilting cotton. So check that all out over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and until next time, happy quilting.